Database plays a major role in handling the records and maintaining the sequence of it. In order to ensure that there are no defects while processing the data, database testing is essential. And Selenium is one such tool which helps you in providing with the functionalities to test the database. Hey everyone, this is Neha from Edureka, and in this session I will give you insights on how to perform database testing using Selenium. Let's have a look at the agenda for the session. First, I will tell you what is Java database connectivity. As you all might know that the very first step is the database connection. Next, I will talk about the steps involved to create a JDBC application. Once you understand this, then we will dive deeper and understand the fundamentals of Selenium. And finally, I will wrap up the session by telling how to perform database testing using Selenium with the help of a demo. I hope you found the agenda interesting. Now, without wasting any further time, let's get straight into the module. Let's first understand what is JDBC, that is Java Database Connectivity. It is one of the standard Java API for database independent connectivity between the Java programming language and a wide range of databases. This application programming interface lets you encode the access request statements in structured query language. They are then passed to the program that manages the database. It mainly involves opening a connection, creating SQL database, executing the SQL queries, and then arriving at the output. And we can use this JDBC API to access tabular data stored in the relational database. With the help of this, we can save, update, delete, and fetch the data from the various databases. It is very similar to the Open Database Connectivity, that is ODBC, provided by the Microsoft. So Java Database Connectivity comprises some of the components like Driver Manager, Driver, and Connection. Driver Manager is used to manage the list of database drivers. The first driver that recognizes a certain subprotocol under JDBC will be used to establish a database connection. Next, Driver is an interface that handles the communications with the database server. It also abstracts the details that are associated with the working of driver objects. Next, Connection. This is also an interface that consists of all the methods required to connect to a database. The connection object represents communication context. That is, all communication with the database is through connection object only. So these are the three important components of a JDBC. Now let's see some of the SQL commands that helps us to create a database, use a database, insert the records in the table, etc. So first, create database. So you can simply create the database with the help of this command, that is create database followed by the database name. Next, drop database. If you don't wish to keep the database that you have created, then you can simply delete it with the help of this command like drop database followed by the database name. Next, create table. Once you create the database, you need to create a table in that so that you can insert the records into the table. So you can just create the table like create table followed by the table name and all the data types that you wish to. Next, if you wish to drop the table, you can simply drop the table with this command, that is drop table followed by table name. Next, you can insert the value depending on the table that you have created. Okay, this is some of the MySQL commands that will help you to create a database, create table, and insert the data into the table. First, I want to create a database and a table and insert the records. So I have a MySQL command line client. So you can install MySQL server and the workbench from the website. So when you install that, the MySQL command line client will also be there. You can either use your command prompt or you can use the MySQL command line client. So I am using this because it is very helpful for me. I'll just enter the password because I have set my privileges for that. And you can see that as soon as I entered the password, it welcomed me to MySQL monitor. So here I can write MySQL commands. So first I will show the databases that is already present. So this is how I need to do that. So this is a list of the database, that is EMP, MySQL, Selenium, says everything. So if I want to use the EMP database, so what I'll say use EMP. Database got changed. Now what I'll do, I'll show the tables. In that I have a table named employees. Next, I want to list the records present in this table. So what I'll do, I'll just type select star from employees. Correct? So this is the details which has ID, age, first name and last name. Yes. So if I just want to create a database, I'll just say create database. Database name will be database testing. Okay. So what happened? One row got affected, which means a database called database testing got created. Let's see whether it got created or not. So what I'll say show databases. So you can see there's a database called database testing. Now I want to use that. So it got changed. Say I want to create a table called records. Varchar 100. So you can see here when I wanted to create a table called records with a varchar with the name as attribute which has varchar 100 and ID with varchar of 2. Okay. So the table got created. So what I'll say, show tables. So you can see records got inserted. Now I will insert the values in this table. I'll say insert into records values. So I want to put the name as Edureka and ID will be 10. Okay. It got inserted. So when I say select star from records, what should happen? It should display the values that is present in the records, that is Edureka followed by 10. Yes. So you can see that. So this is how you can create the table, you can create the database, you can change the database, you can switch to any of the database, you can insert the records and you can display the records. Okay. Now that you know what is JDBC and how to create a table, how to insert the records, how to display the records, everything, let's move forward and see what are the various steps involved to create a JDBC application. So first you have to import the packages. So in this you need to include the packages that contains the JDBC classes that is required for database programming. So register the driver and open a connection. Here you have to initialize the driver so that you can open a communication channel with the database. You can register to the database with the help of the command that I will tell you later. Once you register the driver, then you can use the getConnection method to create a connection object which represents a physical connection with the database. Next, you have to execute the query. This requires using an object of type statement for building and submitting an SQL statement to the database. Next, you have to extract the data from the result set. This requires that you use the appropriate getText method to retrieve the data from the result set. And the last step is to clean up the environment. Here, you need to explicitly close all the database resources that rely on the JVM garbage collection. So these are the various steps involved to create a JDBC application. Now let's see how it works. So I have created one database testing. So I'm not making use of Selenium integration over here. I just want to show you how the actual JDBC application works, and then we'll see how to test that application with the help of a Selenium. Okay. So first, I imported all the connection, the statement, driver manager, result set and SQL exception because it is required. And I'm just creating a class called Selenium Database Testing. So first, as you remember what? We have to specify the driver. So this is a driver. You can download the jar file from Google, say MySQL jar file, and you have to just right click on the project, go to build path and choose configure build path and click on the libraries and make sure that you have your MySQL connector. Okay. After that, you should specify the database URL. That will be like this, starts with JDBC, then you will give a colon and provided by the path, that is MySQL, the local host, and followed by the database name. So I'm using this database, say use EMP, show tables. So this is the database that I'm using for my application, which contains all these records. Okay, so you can see it has an ID, age, first name and last name, and these are the records that I have inserted. Okay, so that will be the path for my database URL. And next, I have set up my username as root and password as Edureka. Do you remember, as soon as I entered the MySQL command line client, it asked for a password and I entered this. So after that, I will create my main method and initialize the connection and statement object to null. Next, I have to register the driver. Second step, because the first step was database credentials. Now what I will do, I'll register the JDBC driver. So I will use class.forName followed by the driver. Okay. Next, in order to open a connection, I'm using the connection object and I'm trying to get the connection using driver manager.getConnection. I'll specify the database URL, that will be this one, and then I'll specify the database credentials, that is username and password. After that, what was the next step? The next step was to execute the query. So for that, what I'll do, I'll use a statement object. So I'll just print the statement telling print creating statement, and then I will print the statement using connection.create statement. So I'm going to create a string called SQL, and for that I'll write my query, that is select ID, first name, last name and age from employees. You can see here it has an ID, age, first name and last name. So in that sequence, it has to get the records from the database. So after that, what I am doing, I am just creating a result set to execute the query. So I will pass my SQL because that is a string object that I have created, and I will pass that. Now I want to retrieve the details by column name. I will write a while loop for that and try to get the column name by saying int id is equal to result set dot get int of id and get int of age. So first I'll retrieve the id and age because they are of int type. Next, then I will write a string data type for first name and last name and get the string values for first name and last name. Then what I will do, I'll display the values with the help of the print statement in this way. So after all this, what was the last step? The last step was to clean up the environment. So I'll close the result set, I'll close the statement object, and I'll close the connection object. So if there are any exceptions, then catch block will handle all the exceptions. And in the finally block, and again, if there is any statement and connection object that is not equal to null, I want to close that as well. And finally, what I will say, I'll say goodbye. So this is how you need to create a JDBC application, wherein first you will connect to a database with the credentials, you will register a driver, you will open a connection, you will execute the query, and then you will retrieve the result, you will finally you will clean up the environment. So now let's run and check the output. Let's see how it works. So first it is telling it's connecting to a database, it's creating a statement. Then it retrieved all the results based on the type that we have specified in our database over here. So you can see, and it just printed in this format because I gave ID and then age and then the first name and then the last name. And finally it said goodbye. Okay. So this is how you need to create a JDBC application. So now, what is our task? Our task is to perform a database testing and check whether the test was passed or failed. Now let's see how to do that. Before performing database testing, let's first understand what is Selenium. Selenium is one of the open source portable framework that is used to automate testing of web applications. It is flexible when it comes to testing functional and regression test cases. Selenium test scripts can be written in different programming languages like Java, Python, C#, and many more. All these Selenium test scripts can also run across various browsers like Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Opera, and also provides support across various platforms like Windows, Mac, Linux, and Solaris. Selenium also helps in creating robust browser-based regression automation suites and perform the test cases. So this is all about what is Selenium. Now let's see how to perform database testing using Selenium. As you might know, Selenium does not support database testing, but partially you can do it using JDBC and ODBC. Here, I will connect the Java program with the database and fetch the data tables and will verify it based on our requirement. So I will be integrating Selenium and TestNG. So in order to perform the testing, I'm using MySQL database. You can also use Oracle and other databases as well. So I am using MySQL database and I'm integrating Selenium and TestNG framework, which is an automation testing framework wherein NG stands for next generation. TestNG is inspired from JUnit, which uses the annotations. Using TestNG, you can generate a proper report and you can easily come to know how many test cases are passed, failed, and skipped. Okay. So what we'll be doing, we'll be using the TestNG framework. So I'll close this. So here I have written the same program using TestNG. So first what I will do, I have imported all the packages along with the packages that I have already imported before. I'm using the TestNG annotation test, before test and after test, so that you'll understand what are the actions that is supposed to be performed before the test and at test and after the test as well. So I have created a class called database testing demo. So as usual, first I will initialize the connection object and the statement object. And then what I will do, I will specify the database URL. That will be the same one that I have used. And then I'll specify the credentials for the database username and the password, that is root and Edureka. So now what I will do, I will use the at before test annotation. So you can say it comes under the package org.annotations.beforetest. So it can be written like target value of the method, retention, and documented. So first, I will create a method called setup which throws the exception. Inside the try block, I will first make the database connection, telling string db class is equal to, I'll specify my driver. And I want to get the connection for that. So what I will do, I'll create connection con is equal to driver manager.get connection. I'll specify the database URL. I'll write the username and the database password. And next, I want the statement object to send the SQL statement to the database. And for that, what I will say, I will tell statement is equal to connection.create statement. So that will help us to create the statement. So these are the actions that has to be performed before the test. And now let's see what should happen at the test. At the test, I will create a method called test, and inside the try block, I'll write the query that is select star from employees. That is the same thing that I have written over here so that it will retrieve all the results. After that, I will create a result set, that is, it will help us to get the contents of the user information table from DB, that is from the employees table. Okay. So that will be result set result is equal to statement.execute query, because I am passing here as query because I am using it here as query only. And now I want to print the results until all the records are printed. And result.next method returns true if there are any next records, else it returns false. So for that, I'm trying to get the results by using the getString method. And finally, if any exceptions are there, it will be handled. And the last step is to close the database connection. So that will be done after the test, that is clean up the environment. So I'll create a method called teardown and then close the connection using if condition. If connection is not equal to null, then just close the connection. Is it the same from the previous program? Yes, right? So now let's see what will happen when we execute this test case. Before that, you just have to check the build path. So you can see there's a MySQL connector jar, there is Selenium jars, and there's a TestNG library, there is Maven dependencies, there is Selenium server as well. Okay. So I want to run this as a TestNG test. So once I run this, let's check what happens with the output. So first it said it detected the testng version and it printed the records based on the ID, age, first name and last name. Same way how it was present in our database. Yes, ID, age, first name and last name. Just that the column names are not there. And on the default test, it shows that the test run was 1. There were no failures and there was no skips. And you can see the test was passed. And also on the default suite as well, the total test that was run was 1. There were no failures. Again, there is no skips as well. So now I want to perform the database testing on another database. Say I want to perform it on, we'll use the database testing thing. Okay. So I will use the database testing database and I will use the records as a table in that. Instead of EMP, I'll make it as database testing. And select star from records. Is that correct? So now let's run and check what happens with the output. Again, I will run this as a testng test. So testng is running. So you can see it printed the values present in that database, which is select star from records. It just has one name and one ID. Okay, so first it printed one name and one ID and then it threw the exception because I am trying to get the result from the rest of the 3 strings which is suitable for the EMP database. But with this case, there is no any records. If I insert 3 more records into that, then it will not throw any error. Though it throwed error, it still said the test was passed because I retrieved the value from the database and there was no failures as well. But this exception is just because of what? Because I'm trying to get the other 3 records as well, and that's the reason. So this is how you can test the database using Java database connectivity and by integrating Selenium with testng. Okay. So this is how testng is very helpful to run the test cases, to check whether the test was passed or failed and if there are any failures or skips in the test. Okay. So I hope you understood how to perform database testing using Selenium. If you have any queries, you can comment in the comment section below and we will reply back to you at the earliest. So that was all about this session. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you and happy learning.